Locked in Fear, A Tale of Isolation and the Unseen Visitor. The Unseen Visitor. During the lockdown, a woman was living alone in her apartment. She started hearing strange noises at night and footsteps in the hallway, but every time she checked, no one was there. One night, she woke up to find a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. The figure vanished when she turned on the light, but she never found out who or what had been visiting her during lockdown. The woman tried to brush off the incident as a dream, but the memory of the shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed stayed with her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Even during the day when she was working from home, she started to feel paranoid and constantly looked over her shoulder. As the weeks went by, the noises at night continued, but the figure never appeared again. One night, however, she heard a loud banging on her front door. She peeked through the peephole and saw a figure wearing a hoodie and a mask. She panicked and called the police, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone. After that incident, the woman decided to move out of her apartment and stay with a friend until the lockdown was over. She never found out who or what had been visiting her during lockdown, but the memory of the shadowy figure stayed with her for a long time. The woman moved in with her friend, grateful for the company and the safety of being around another person. However, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her since the incident with the shadowy figure. She tried to distract herself by watching movies and chatting with her friend, but she found herself constantly checking the locks on the doors and windows. She had trouble sleeping and started having nightmares about the figure standing at the foot of her bed. One day, she received a package in the mail. It was a small box wrapped in brown paper with no return address. She hesitated before opening it, wondering if it was from the person who had been visiting her during lockdown. Finally, she mustered up the courage to tear off the paper and open the box. Inside, she found a single piece of paper with a message scrawled in black ink, "I'm still here." The woman felt her heart racing and her hands shaking. She showed the note to her friend, who advised her to call the police again. This time, the police took the note seriously and promised to investigate. The investigation turned up no leads, and the woman was left feeling more scared and vulnerable than ever. She started to avoid going out and would only leave the house when she had to. She even started to feel like her friend's house wasn't safe anymore. One night, she woke up to find her friend standing over her bed. The woman screamed and pushed her friend away, scrambling to the other side of the room. Her friend looked confused and scared, and the woman realized that she had been having a nightmare. The next morning, the woman decided that she needed to take control of her fear. She started researching self-defense techniques and signed up for a martial arts class. She also got in touch with a therapist who specialized in anxiety and trauma. The woman slowly started to regain her confidence and sense of security. She still had trouble sleeping and would occasionally hear strange noises, but she had learned to cope with her fear. One day, she received another package in the mail. This time, it was a letter from the police. They had found the person responsible for the note and the strange incidents during lockdown. It turned out to be a neighbor who had been struggling with mental health issues. The woman felt a sense of relief and closure, knowing that she was no longer in danger. She decided to move back into her own apartment, determined to reclaim her space and her sense of safety. The first few nights were difficult, and she would wake up at the slightest sound, but she had learned to trust herself and her instincts, and gradually the fear started to fade away. Months passed, and the woman had almost forgotten about the scary incidents during lockdown. She was sitting on her couch one evening, reading a book, when she heard a noise outside her door. Her heart started pounding, and she froze, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The woman's hands were shaking as she walked over to the door, trying to calm herself down. She took a deep breath and opened the door. On the other side was a man she didn't recognize. He introduced himself as a new neighbor and apologized for the noise he had made earlier. The woman felt a wave of relief wash over her, and she smiled at the man. As he walked away, she realized that she had finally moved on from the fear and paranoia that had haunted her during lockdown. She felt a sense of pride in herself for overcoming her fear and a sense of gratitude for the people who had helped her along the way. The woman realized that fear was a natural part of life, but it didn't have to control her. She had the power to face her fears and move past them. She made a promise to herself to always be vigilant and aware of her surroundings, but to never let fear paralyze her again. Over time, the woman started to feel like herself again. She started going out more and making plans with friends. She even started dating again, something she hadn't been able to do during the height of her fear. However, just when she thought things were finally getting back to normal, the pandemic struck again. Lockdowns and social distancing measures were put in place, and the woman found herself back in her apartment, alone. At first, she felt a sense of dread and fear creeping up on her again. The memories of the previous lockdown and the strange incidents flooded back, and she struggled to stay calm. But this time, she was prepared. She had the tools and resources to help her cope with her fear. She had learned the importance of reaching out for help and support, and she knew that she was not alone. She made sure to keep in touch with a therapist and her friends, even if it was just through video calls and text messages. She took up new hobbies and kept herself busy with work and projects around the house. And when she heard strange noises or felt a sense of unease, she reminded herself of all the progress she had made and all the strength she had within her. The lockdown was tough, but the woman knew that she was tougher. She had faced her fears once, and she could do it again. As the lockdown lifted and the world slowly started to reopen, the woman emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. She had faced her darkest fears and come out the other side, and she knew that she could face anything life threw her way. The memory of the unseen visitor still haunted her at times, but it no longer controlled her. She had taken control of her fear and had emerged victorious. The woman realized that fear was a natural part of life, but it was how we faced it that mattered. She had learned that it was okay to be scared, as long as she didn't let the fear consume her. And she knew that she would never forget the lessons she had learned during lockdown, the lessons that had made her stronger and more resilient than ever before. Story 2. The Abandoned Office. A group of coworkers were stuck in their office during the lockdown. They tried to make the best of it by playing games and telling each other stories, but the atmosphere became increasingly tense as the days wore on. One night, they heard strange noises coming from the empty floors above them. They decided to investigate, but when they got up there, they found the offices completely abandoned. As they were leaving, they heard a loud thump and turned around to see a ghostly figure staring back at them. The group of coworkers huddled together, their hearts pounding in their chests as they stared in shock at the ghostly figure standing before them. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light as it silently watched them. For a moment, no one moved or spoke, too terrified to break the silence. Finally, one of them found the courage to speak up. Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The ghostly figure didn't answer, but instead began to move towards them. The coworkers scrambled backwards, tripping over each other in their haste to get away. As they fled down the stairs, they could hear the ghostly figure following them, its footsteps echoing loudly in the empty hallway. Finally, they burst out into the night air, gasping for breath. "What the hell was that?" one of them panted, still in shock from the encounter. "I don't know," another said, her voice trembling, "but I don't want to stick around and find out." With that, they quickly made their way to their cars and drove off into the night, not daring to look back. In the days and weeks that followed, the group of coworkers couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over them. They knew that what they had seen was real, and they couldn't explain it away. Despite their fear, they couldn't resist the urge to return to the abandoned office, hoping to find some answers. But every time they went back, they found nothing but empty rooms and eerie silence. Eventually, they were forced to accept that they may never know the truth behind what had happened in that office. But the memory of that ghostly figure would stay with them forever, a haunting reminder of the strange and mysterious forces that lurked in the darkness. As the days went by, the group of coworkers found it increasingly difficult to focus on their work. The memory of the ghostly figure haunted them constantly, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. At night, they dreamed of the abandoned office, of the strange noises that had echoed through the halls and the ghostly figure that had appeared before them. They would wake up in a cold sweat, unable to shake the feeling of dread that had settled over them. One evening, they gathered together to discuss their experiences. They knew that they needed to do something to put their minds at ease, but they didn't know where to start. "We need to find out what happened in that office," one of them said. "There has to be some kind of explanation." "But how do we do that?" another asked. "We've already searched the entire building, and we didn't find anything." "We could try to do some research," a third suggested. "Maybe there's a history to that office that we don't know about." They all agreed that this was a good idea, and they spent the next few days digging through old records and archives, trying to find any information they could about the building. It wasn't until they stumbled upon an old newspaper article from the 1950s that they finally found a lead. The article described a fire that had broken out in the same office that they had been working in. The fire had destroyed much of the building, and several people had died in the blaze. The group of coworkers were shocked by this revelation. They had never heard about the fire before, and they couldn't believe that something so tragic had happened in the same space where they had been working. As they continued to dig through old records, they uncovered more information about the fire. They learned that the building had been abandoned for several years after the blaze, and that it had only recently been reopened. The more they learned about the fire, the more they began to suspect that the ghostly figure they had seen was one of the victims. They couldn't be sure, of course, but it seemed like the most logical explanation. Determined to find out more, they decided to visit the local historical society to see if they could learn anything else about the fire. It was there that they met an elderly man who had lived in the area for his entire life. When they told him about the fire, he nodded knowingly. "I remember that fire," he said. "It was a terrible thing. I knew some of the people who died in it." The group of coworkers listened intently as the man told them about the fire, about how it had been started by a faulty electrical system and how the flames had quickly spread throughout the building. He also told them about the people who had died in the fire, about how they had been trapped on the upper floors of the building and had been unable to escape. The group of coworkers were both horrified and saddened by the man's story. They couldn't believe that something so tragic had happened in their own workplace, and they felt a deep sense of empathy for the people who had lost their lives in the fire. As they left the historical society, they knew that they needed to do something to honor the memory of the fire's victims. They decided to organize a memorial service in the abandoned office, a way to pay tribute to those who had lost their lives. It took them several days to organize the service, but when the day finally arrived, they were all filled with a sense of purpose and hope. They arrived at the office early in the morning, carrying candles and flowers with them. As they made their way up the stairs to the upper floors, they could feel the weight of history pressing down upon them. They knew that they were walking in the same space where so many people had lost their lives, and they felt a deep sense of reverence and respect. When they reached the abandoned office, they found that it was just as they had left it. The desks were covered in dust, and the walls were peeling and cracked, but there was also a sense of stillness and quiet, as if the space was waiting for them to pay their respects. They set up the candles and flowers in the center of the room, and they took a moment to light the candles and say a silent prayer. As they stood there in the flickering candlelight, they could feel the weight of history and the sorrow of loss all around them. One of the coworkers started to speak, her voice shaking with emotion. "We are here today to honor the memory of those who lost their lives in this terrible fire," she said. "We may not have known them personally, but we feel a deep sense of connection to them. We work in the same space where they once worked, and we want to show them that they have not been forgotten." The others nodded in agreement, and they each took turns speaking about their experiences in the office, about the strange noises they had heard and the ghostly figure they had seen. They also spoke about their own fears and anxieties, about how the experience had affected them deeply. As they spoke, they could feel a sense of healing and catharsis wash over them. It was as if the act of speaking their fears aloud had taken some of the power away from them. When they were finished speaking, they sat in silence for a few moments, letting the weight of the moment sink in, and then one of them started to sing softly. The others joined in, their voices blending together in a haunting melody. It was a simple song, one that they had learned as children, but in that moment, it felt like the most important thing in the world. As they finished the song, they blew out the candles and gathered up the flowers. They knew that they couldn't change what had happened in the past, but they could honor the memory of those who had been lost. As they left the abandoned office, they could feel a sense of closure and peace settling over them. They knew that they would never forget what had happened in that space, but they also knew that they had found a way to move forward. In the weeks and months that followed, the group of coworkers continued to work in the same office, but something had changed. They no longer felt the same sense of fear and dread that had haunted them before. Instead, they felt a sense of respect and reverence for the space, and for the people who had worked there before them. They also started to notice something else. The strange noises that they had heard before had stopped. It was as if the act of honoring the memory of the fire's victims had put their spirits to rest. The group of coworkers never forgot about the abandoned office, or the ghostly figure they had seen, but they also knew that they had found a way to make peace with their experience. They had found a way to move forward, and to honor the memory of those who had been lost. Story 3. The Quarantine Killer. A family was quarantined together in their home during lockdown. They started receiving strange letters and packages from an unknown sender, and soon realized that someone was trying to harm them. They locked all the doors and windows, but one night they heard a loud banging on the front door. When they looked through the peephole, they saw a figure wearing a mask and holding a weapon. They called the police, but the figure was never caught, and they never found out who was trying to harm them. Continue generate. ChatGPT. After the incident, The family became increasingly paranoid and fearful, never quite sure if the person who had targeted them would return. They began to experience insomnia, nightmares, and anxiety, which affected their daily lives and relationships. Despite the lack of progress in the investigation, the police continued to monitor the area and provided support to the family. They advised them to stay vigilant and to report any suspicious activity immediately. As the lockdown restrictions eventually eased and people began to return to their normal routines, the family slowly began to feel safer and more secure. However, the experience had left a lasting impact on them, and they remained cautious and wary. Months later, the police received a tip-off about a possible suspect in the case. After further investigation, they were able to arrest a man who had a history of violence and had been targeting families who were quarantined during lockdown. The man was charged and convicted for his crimes, bringing some closure to the traumatized family. While the family was relieved to know that the perpetrator had been caught, the experience had left a deep scar on their psyche. They continued to receive counseling and support to help them cope with the trauma and anxiety caused by the events of that terrifying lockdown period. As the family began to recover from the trauma of the incident, they started to rebuild their lives. However, the memory of the experience was never far from their minds, and they became increasingly anxious about their safety and security. They installed a state-of-the-art security system in their home, including motion sensors and cameras, to ensure that they would be alerted to any potential danger. They also started to attend therapy sessions to help them deal with the trauma and anxiety caused by the incident. The therapy sessions were a vital source of support for the family, helping them to cope with their fears and anxieties and to find ways to move forward. As they began to heal, the family started to look for ways to make a positive impact in their community. They became involved in local neighborhood watch groups, helping to keep their areas safe and secure. They also started to volunteer at local charities and community organizations, using their experience to raise awareness about the importance of safety and security. The family's experience had a profound impact on their lives, but it also served as a reminder of the importance of coming together as a community during difficult times. As the world continues to navigate the ongoing pandemic, it is more important than ever to support one another and to work together to overcome the challenges we face. In the aftermath of the incident, the family also became more aware of the importance of mental health and well-being. They recognized that trauma can have a lasting impact on individuals and families, and that it is essential to seek support and guidance to help manage the effects. The family's experience is a powerful reminder that even during times of crisis and uncertainty, we can find hope and strength in the support of those around us. By coming together as a community, we can overcome the challenges we face and emerge stronger and more resilient. The lockdown period was a difficult time for many families, as they were forced to adapt to a new way of life and cope with the stress and anxiety of the pandemic. However, it also brought out the best in people, as communities came together to support one another and to find new ways of connecting and staying connected. As the world continues to navigate the ongoing pandemic, it is essential to remember the lessons we have learned during this challenging time. By supporting one another, staying connected, and prioritizing mental health and well-being, we can overcome the challenges we face and emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before. In conclusion, the experience of the family and the quarantine killer is a powerful reminder of the importance of safety, security, and mental health during times of crisis and uncertainty. While the family's experience was a traumatic one, It also served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of community to overcome even the most difficult challenges. Despite the progress made by the family in the aftermath of the incident, the trauma they experienced continued to linger, affecting their daily lives and relationships. They found it difficult to trust others and to feel safe, even in the most familiar of surroundings. As time went on, they also started to experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, including flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety. To address these issues, the family continued to attend therapy sessions, but also sought out alternative methods of healing. They explored meditation, yoga, and other mindfulness practices, which helped them to find a sense of inner peace and calm. They also started to focus on self-care, making time for exercise, healthy eating, and hobbies that brought them joy and relaxation. As the family continued to work through their trauma, they began to find a sense of purpose in their experience. They realized that their story could be a source of inspiration for others who had experienced similar traumas, and they started to share their story with others. Through their advocacy work, the family started to raise awareness about the importance of mental health and well-being, and the need for support and guidance for those who have experienced trauma. They worked with local organizations to provide resources and support to those in need, and became a source of strength and encouragement for others who were struggling. As the family continued on their journey of healing and recovery, they also found that their experience had brought them closer together. They had learned to communicate more effectively, to support one another, and to find joy in the small moments of life. They realized that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that by staying connected and supporting one another, we can overcome even the most difficult challenges. In the end, the family's experience with the quarantine killer had a profound impact on their lives, but it also taught them valuable lessons about resilience, community, and the power of healing. Their story serves as a reminder that even during the most challenging of times, we can find strength and support in those around us. And now, with time and perseverance, we can overcome even the greatest of obstacles.